Welcome back, friends. It's another global episode for the global podcast that is the Mindful CEO,
The mammoth,
the
right?
mammoth.
It makes me think of Welcome to the Machine, the Pink Floyd song, right?
Yeah.
By the way, we could turn this into a monster if we all pull together as a team.
Oh,
Um,
that's a great segue.
oh, dude, it's that song is time. There's a series of albums in there that are just fucking timeless, for as far as I'm concerned. Now that's just because I'm old and I'd like
Yeah.
to hang on to the youth when I listen to those as long as
Don't let go.
possible. So I call that timeless.
That's right.
But you know, go ahead and
Never,
be well, wish you were here as an album. Go ahead, try it. Um,
never let that go.
Never let that go. All right, yeah. Anyway, welcome to the mammoth, unbelievable, world
Yes.
dominating machine, mindful CEO podcast
That's
has
right.
turned into. I think we've crossed the threshold into double digit listeners. It's very exciting for us.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like it's killer.
It's
We were in a conversation yesterday in a group that we're in and talking about throwing the ball around versus playing the game. I'm curious what you heard in that because how did you hear that? So we can set it up for listeners, and then
Yeah. Well, so I heard it like, there's okay, there's I think there's three different things. I think there's throwing the ball around, I think there's practice,
mm,
and I think there's the game.
okay, throwing
Right?
the ball around. Those are in incremental orders. There's
Yeah,
less
exactly.
than practice is throwing the ball around.
That's right, throwing the ball around.
More than
And
throwing the ball around is practice, and more than practice is playing the game.
that's right. And practice is an intention to get better at throwing the ball around. Throwing the
Ah,
ball around is just throwing the ball around.
yeah,
And practice is more than just getting better at throwing the ball around.
yeah,
Practice is has an intention that you develop a skill that will in not eventually, but as an outcome, have you succeed in the game.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Practice is intentional. Throwing the ball around is a free form sort of event, like an opportunity just to see
Yeah.
where shit goes. Um,
Yeah, let me set that up a little bit more. Let me back out of that for a second because
yeah,
I realized I dropped you right into that. Because where I was coming at in that conversation for all of you listening was, I feel like there's a lot of us who want something different. We want to be the change we wish to see in the world. Uh, we feel the limitations of the old world, two comma club, hustle grind, Lamborghini leaning way
funnel
of things.
hacking.
Funnel hacking. We've seen sort of the limitations of that, at least for us, those of us who are trying to find a more mindful approach forward. And and so we have these ideas and aspirations of like, yeah, it'd be great to do something different, but then we don't do shit with it. We just kind of get stuck in the way things are. And so we go on and ideate or mentally masturbate these ideas about how great it would be to do something, and then we don't do shit. And I think the conversation yesterday was inspired by this desire of like, look, I like throwing the ball around with you in this podcast, or I like the community that we're in on Thursdays. I like what we do there. And it occurs to me like we're throwing the ball around, and it's fun to do that. And I enjoy that. And I also feel like I can't shake this feeling like we're missing the opportunity to play a bigger game and actually make some change in the world if we were to get focused on that.
Yeah,
And I didn't have the answer to that yesterday. It was simply a question to see where it goes. But that was,
totally get it. And
yeah,
and I so there's a couple of thoughts I have out of what you just said. So
yeah,
for sure, I mean, we've discussed this before, the safety of ideation versus the risk of execution.
yeah, yeah.
That ideation is everyone's got a fucking great idea. Everyone has $1 million idea. There's no one who doesn't have $1 million idea. Everyone's got $1 million idea, right?
Yeah.
Which is a little bit like, you walk into a museum and you see Jackson Pollock and you go, well, I could do that, but you fucking didn't, and you don't, and you won't. So let's not fucking talk about it
All right, right.
because you didn't execute that and you're not going to. And so for you to say I could is just a bizarre thing to say. It's very weird and compensatory, and it gets you off the hook for the fact that dealing with
Mm,
you didn't actually do anything. So there's a world in which action is the only thing that produces any results. And I'm steeped in that world. I'm in favor of that world. It does imply there's a world where action doesn't produce, or something else produces results, and we could get into that or not. But there's a world of so there's that, right? So there is that, definitely, there's a time to, but with the part that I think is missed in that little bit of a diatribe about, we got to fucking do something, which is valid, is the immense amount of value there is in just throwing the ball around. That this podcast is for sure on one hand, it's an execution of an idea. So on one hand, this is the execution of an idea, right? We don't just talk about having a podcast, right? I know it's very rare in our culture for two old white guys to get a podcast together. I mean, it's never happened. So it's a very low bar of execution, right? This is Chris and Aaron having a Zoom call every week and recording it.
Yeah.
As low of a bar to execution as you can get. But nonetheless, there's an execution involved and a reliability and a standard and a way of doing things that we don't just talk about it. So there's that. But the intention of it is to throw the ball around. The intention here is to do nothing more than throw the ball around.
Yeah.
Out of the value of throwing the ball around. So, and that's an enormous piece that I think in the funnel hacking, 2 Comma Club, hustle and grind, Lamborghini leaning reality, throwing the ball around is not a valued practice. It's not a valued thing to do. Right?
It's not valued in that culture. It's
culture,
valuable, but it's
that's
not
right. In that
it's
culture,
not valuable. Yeah, got it.
In that culture,
you
at the best, you would have to be at a mastermind. You paid money to be with smarter people, and walk out with a million ideas and then start to execute. And it's just not playing. It's just not playing. And playing is throwing the ball around. Playing is, banging on pots. There's no score to keep. You're not intending that it produce something that you keep score with. You're actually just playing.
Yeah.
Throwing the ball around, walking in the woods. It is an end unto itself. It's interesting because it's interesting to you.
Yeah.
And that's very much the heart of what you and I do. Like I have to keep sort of beating off, well, what the fuck's the point of this, right? Because that comes into the picture, and then I get, the point of it is, I don't know what the point of it is. The point is, I'd like to spend time not having to deal with, there has to be a point to everything. I just want to hang out and talk about interesting shit with my friend Chris. That's the entirety of it. So I think that's a big piece of what this is, right? So inside that rant about you got to do something, I want to make sure the value of not doing something is settled, that this podcast is never going to be about, between you and I, never going to be about accomplishing something. And this episode's about what we're out to accomplish, which is fun. That's the bridge, right? So there's down the actual execution, like out of authentically having no agenda and just throwing the ball around, what opens up, or what's potential to open up, and if you're open to it, what is there to be done is new ideas that are possible for you to execute on. And we're both clear that unless you're executing on stuff, you can only throw the ball around for so long.
Yeah.
And before you realize that throwing the ball around is not, in fact, going to make the difference you want to make in the world.
Right.
That you need to execute some thought.
Yeah.
And, while we bring on guests and everything that we do on this podcast is about throwing the ball around to spur new ideas, to do new things. And one way it's a mastermind of sorts, but it's just a very agendaless, low demand, free-form mastermind. You and I each have, as it turns out, new projects that are launching currently that I thought it would be cool to explore because they came out of this partnership. They were things that have arisen naturally, organically, out of this partnership, out of this conversation. And they're both completely consistent. Anyway, I just thought it'd be interesting to hear.
Yeah.
People would be interested in hearing about what actually is opening up, what we're offering out of this. So Chris, start with Business Church. I
Yeah.
don't
I
know
mean,
about business. You just laid that on me this morning. I'm like,
yeah, it's
is
weird
it the
that
church of business? Is it business church? Is it hallelujah? Show me the KPI. What is
yeah,
praise the
it's funny.
Lord and pass the
Praise the Lord.
spreadsheet.
Yeah, no, I've thought about it for 5 or 6 years back when I had started a networking group, and we casually were calling it business church because it felt like we would get together every week, kind of like you would at a church. And in some ways going to church, my background is a Christian. I don't fit that inside that box anymore, but it, every week people show up to church on a Sunday, and you're passing the ball around. There's no scrimmage, there's no game to play. You're there to hang out, to get spiritually fed, to meet people, fill your soul with inspiration so you can go back out in the world and, live another day. And what I have noticed over the years is that there are places you can go to have spiritual conversations, like a church or a temple, a synagogue. There's right there, you can do that. And then there are places you can go to have a business conversation, like a chamber of commerce or a networking group, a 2 Comma Club mastermind. But there aren't many places. It's hard. I can't find them where you can go have a spiritual conversation about business. Where do you go for those of us who are on a spiritual path and yet work for ourselves? Where can we go to have a conversation and inspire our soul for the business we're in? And so that is where those two worlds meet, is the place that business church happens. That's the space of business church. And I intend to start it off as a YouTube channel with, content and then a premium, like a Patreon premium subscriber, $11 a month, get additional content, but support the work of business church. So it's a Patreon model, not a, let me sell you a membership, although it's probably called a membership, but become a member of business church, but it's $11 a month, and you're doing it to support the work, not because you're getting some huge thing in return. And then I imagine inside of that container, there are opportunities for online, weekly networking, monthly networking, like meet other. It's so refreshing to meet other people who are thinking about business from a similar spiritual lens. And so to meet each other, I think is one of the benefits of church. I think there's a lot of things that Christian churches get wrong, just from my own experience. But one of the things I think Christian churches do really well is provide a space for people to meet each other and connect with each other. So that's business church, man.
That's awesome. And so what's an example, Chris, of a spiritual bit? I mean, it should be right there for me, but it's not. I mean, because it doesn't sound like it's, a huge departure from this on one hand, right? I mean, this is, we could call it, I don't think I'd be off by thinking of this as at least parallel to
Sure.
business.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of.
Give me an example of some of the content. What does it look like to be a member, and what do you get? What's the content like?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think just this morning I've got a whole list, a bullet point list, right, of all the different potential topics. But like this morning, I was thinking about how much I just detest idol culture. How much we idolize people in our culture. And that's a very spiritual conversation, because if you go down into the roots of, I was journaling this morning, I was thinking about, what's the song? Save Grace, the Grace one, the Saving Grace, the What a Wretch I Am. Amazing Grace. Yeah, Amazing Grace. And I just think there's this self-identity in our culture about what wretches we are. And so then when we meet people who have written a best-selling book, or are a 2 Comma Club member, or are a pastor with, all sorts of following and influence, we put them on a pedestal because we're the wretch and they're the hero. And we go, oh my God, can I get your autograph? I just think autographs are a really funny piece of our culture. I'm like, why do we wait in line to get someone's signature on a football or a piece of paper? I'm like, this idol culture we live in. And so it never puts us in a seat of agency. It never puts us into our own sovereignty, because someone is always better than we are. And so there isn't a priesthood of all believers, which is a Christian thing to say, like that there is nobody needs a priest to intercede for us, because we're all connected to the divine. We don't need that. You need to start to get in touch with who you are. The I am of things. And so that's just one example of, like, how do we take these cultural identities and how do they show up in business? You're like, look, like we gotta talk about this, because because you keep you keep spending money you don't have for 2 comma club, carrots out in your future because you don't think you're good enough the way you are right now. Anyway, that's just a rant on where that could go. But,
It's awesome, dude. That is great. I mean, in the green room while we were creating
yeah.
the luxurious green room with the
Hmm.
bowl of M&Ms with no brown M&Ms in it.
And the virtual plant.
Yeah, the virtual plant background.
Hmm.
You were talking about your calling as a preacher, and I obviously you can hear it in that little rant. And I think that's a great thing to explore. I just as you were talking, I was dealing with, okay, well, how much of my drive is to become
Mm.
someone's idol?
That's
How
interesting.
much of my drive to become a best-selling author
Mm.
and a thought leader
Mm.
is really to be idolized by others?
Uh-huh.
And I'd like to think none of it,
Right, right.
but that's obviously bullshit.
Sure.
Just because, that would be a denial of the existence of the culture that I live in. That would
Mm.
be like pretending I don't live in I haven't been inundated. Like, Ram Dass is an idol in that way. I mean, a thought leader in that way. And, and the problems with that then come with, the Werner Erhard also, idolized by many, and certainly
Hmm.
in this where sandboxes that I play in, um, those kinds of spaces where that gets gray, and then you get into, the absolute power corrupts absolutely, and the way, that generally has played out in our cultures, that those people rarely are
Hmm.
worthy, or have done really shitty stuff in the background. Um, but then there's,
Hmm.
anyone falls into that category. It's a worthwhile self-reflection, is like, okay, how much of that is, worth my time there? Like to, how much, just something to sit with. I don't have an answer for it, but that's what would come up for me inside that dialogue or that rant would be, how much of my energy is to be idolized, is actually wanting to be idolized. Is Thich Nhat
Right. Yeah.
Hanh an idol? You know, what do we think about that? How do we think about, the spiritual leaders of any age?
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
right. So it's
It's
interesting, and then if you go back, right, is, Aristotle considered an idol? And
yeah, that's the human condition. I think as a leader, so I love to lead. It feels good to lead. I feel like I'm in my strengths. I love the attention that I get when I lead, from the sense of we're in sync. Like if I'm leading and you're picking up what I'm putting down, like, and I'm like, oh, light bulbs are going on, like something's happening. There's some sexual chemistry in the room. Something's happening right now. I'm liking this, and so I like to lead. But I think there's I'll say an obligation. I think there's a responsibility, maybe is a better word, to, as a leader, to check your ego, to check in on how much of this is something we're doing together versus how much of this is me lording over you, that I know things you don't know and I'm better than you. And I think that starts to be where that happens. You go like, oh, look how smart I am and look how dumb you are, and you need me. But a real guru, their whole point, in my understanding of a real guru, is transference. That I
yeah,
will use my leadership to help you along until you realize you don't need my leadership to help you along.
yeah, the people will say they did it themselves. That's the
Right,
Lao Tzu.
right, right.
Um, yeah, yeah. So all that's worthwhile, and again, so business church then becomes on one hand, from it's something you're executing. It's
Yeah,
something you're putting out in the world. It's something you've gone
yeah,
from ideation to execution, and there's a certain amount of throwing the ball around that's going to happen in there.
right.
right? And then there's going to be, but given the context, like the mindful CEO, I mean, this, neither of our projects are, we were talking about little side projects. I mean, they really are directly related to this. That's,
Yeah.
you're going to have the context, the container for those conversations is, how does this impact my business? The thing I'm already executing or the thing I'm going to execute. And,
Right. Yeah.
so the playing around the sandbox has is inside a particular paradigm.
I think, just one more thought on that and then I want to hear about your project is the, inside a church, there are different levels of throwing the ball around, practicing and playing the game. Like, you can just go to church on Sundays and leave. And then there are small groups. Like if you want to kind of dig into some Bible study or you want to go deeper on stuff, join a small group. And the small group meets additional times and the conversation's a little bit more pointed. There's more time commitment. And that would be like a practice to me. Like you're working more intentionally around something
Yeah.
than just showing
Yeah.
up and seeing what you get. And then you're like, hey, you know what? I feel there's a calling for me here. I'm getting, something's awakening in me and I want to be discipled or developed. I want to come up through some mentorship to be a pastor or a leader or a something. And that's to me more of like a playing the game. And I see that inside a business church. I think I see that there are, for those who start to feel like they want more, they want to more than throw the ball around. They want to practice, that there are outlets for that inside a business church. And I'm sure the same is true for inside your projects. And then if you want to take that further, you could hire a coach. There's all kinds of ways you can get developed, but there's got to be something on the front end that's just really low commitment and easy to throw the ball around because it's fun to throw the ball around and you're not asking anything of me. I'm just here to receive.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. It's great. I love that metaphor. Brilliant.
So tell me about
churchiness.
yeah. Yeah. Tell me about living a grateful life in a fucked up world.
Yeah, so I'm rolling out. So I ran a 12-week mindfulness training last summer and had about, I don't know, 10 people in it, something like that. We started maybe with 12 or 14 and wound up with 8 to 10, I think, finished it. And it was 12 weeks. We met every week on Zoom and people had practices and like that. I wanted to run it again, but then, I sat on my ass. And then by the time I got ready to run it again, it was already October. And you can't run it. You can't start a program in November or December. It doesn't really work.
Yeah.
Those 2 months are like, if you're going to do a course, those 2 months count like that week between Christmas and New Year's. It's like dog years for that, right? You just can't, can't roll out anything in that time. So I wanted to roll it out for January and I did. And there's a mindfulness training, right? By the time this podcast gets out, it'll be full. I mean, I'm already almost full now. I have 30 plus people in it, right? And I have it now geared for 9 weeks.
Nice.
And put together a guide, journal, workbook thing. About 90 pages, right? We'll see. And a couple of interesting things happen. And this is what happens when you go from, this is interesting. So this is going from throwing the ball around, practice. This goes through the steps because on one hand, I love when people say things like, are we playing for real now? Right? As if it wasn't all of, what are you playing for real? What the fuck does that even mean? Right now we're going to keep score. I guess that means we're going to keep score, but it's all fucking made up. I mean, you're, and I don't care what the fuck you're talking about. You're always not playing for real, or you're always playing for real. I don't know, pick one or whatever. But everything is relative. So we've been throwing the ball around in here, right? I've been practicing mindfulness now for probably, I don't know, 2 solid years now. I've been practicing the morning gratitude meditations every day. I realize I'm over a year now with every morning. This week was the first week I missed a morning, and I wound up missing 2. I'm like, oh my God, there's leaks in the book. I feel like writing the book used so much mental energy. I just got exhausted, like really exhausted from writing and putting that book together. It was really quite an amazing experience of executing that book. because I've
Mm.
been writing a book now for a while and was like, fuck it, I'm just going to put together a manual journal for the course
Yeah.
and see how much of the book shows up in there, how much more is needed, if there's any more needed for it. So it's
Mm.
80 pages of a book, and I don't know how much more is needed, and we'll see. So now we're in the execute stage of
Yeah.
it. So one thing that showed up is after I got the book done, there's this a space, a gap, a divergence, a discrepancy. How's that?
Hmm.
I got my thesaurus out. Between the workbook, the way I created marketing the course, and I think the intention of the course. So there's a
Hmm.
couple things I think I got commingled
Hmm.
in there. So I've been working on developing a practice in training sales and business people in mindfulness. That's been a
Hmm.
thrust. It's my website, keynote
Uh-huh.
speaker, and mindfulness performance coach, and
Hmm.
like that. I would like to create a pathway of working with businesses in mindfulness. And again, couldn't be, it's obviously something that comes out of throwing the ball around. And here,
Hmm.
the mindful CEO is exactly what that would be creating mindfulness practices and a mindfulness way of living for businesses and salespeople and the difference that makes. So there's that sort of niche,
Yeah.
busy professionals getting
Uh-huh.
access to mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole thing. And, the workbook is geared towards that. The workbook really is exactly geared towards that. So there's even so far as, and I had it, before that, I was even a little more narrow just for realtors. And,
Mm-hmm.
there's a how to prep for a client meeting in there, and
Hmm.
I had to take out different language that was specific to real estate and leave it just sort of generic for busy professionals.
Right.
And then there's this aspect of living a grateful life that I have to contend with, because the book in my mind has been always living a grateful life in a fucked up world.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
noticed that those are sort of different intentions.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so the workbook doesn't go exactly with the course,
Yeah.
because the workbook really is mindfulness for busy professionals.
Yeah.
The course is living a grateful life in a fucked up world. Now, I think, I mean, the people in the course, so that's something that's showing up out of, okay, I'm throwing the ball around. I got these different ideas. I'm going to go execute. Oh shit. Now these two things are, but they
Hmm.
weren't clearly different until I got them written
Hmm.
out. Um, so there's this, so I have a little disclaimer when I'm sending it out to people, because not everyone a friend of mine emailed me and said, look, I'm retired. Is this course going to work for me? Because I'm not a
Hmm.
busy professional.
Hmm.
And
Right.
I don't think there's a couple of things. One is, Daniel Pink's book, To Sell is Human, To Sell is Human.
Hmm.
Um, we all sell. If you're just selling your kids on their bedtime, you're selling.
Right.
If you're an engineer in a company, you're selling at the scrum. The actions everyone's selling something, right? Um,
Right.
so there's not and you're going to tell me how you listen to your clients is radically different than how you listen to your wife. I don't think that's the case.
Right.
Okay. I mean, it may be different, but the mechanism that's doing the listening is the same. You
Yeah.
may have a different listening for your wife or your husband or your kids than you do your clients.
Yeah.
But the fact that you have a listening that you're not responsible for and you have no control over is the
Hmm.
same.
Right. Yeah.
And so, on one hand, we're cool, right? The workbook is definitely going to work for close enough for jazz for the course. And maybe I'm sure I will wind up with separate books by the end of this run through. But that's the kind of thing you only see in execution.
Right.
You
Right.
would never see that in throwing it around. And you wouldn't even really see it in practice.
Right.
You'd only see it when you came time to play the game. You're like, oh, that now is
Uh-huh.
a
Right.
a thing. Um,
Yeah, that's good.
so there's that. that showed up for me. And then,
Hmm.
you know, the course is living a grateful life in a fucked up world. And I've in, and you know, we've been throwing the ball around about gratitude in here for a while. I mean, this is not like you can't be one of the, you know, now 10 people that are listening to the show. I'm very committed in 2025. We're in double digits. We're not going to talk about the 6 people anymore. We're only going to talk about
10.
the double digit listeners. Listeners, tens of listeners. I mean,
Tens.
the
Yeah.
tens of people we speak to.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it can't be the first time you've heard about me talk about gratitude like that. And but in having the application interviews, like talking to people about the course, right? Everyone who's in the course, I've now had a conversation with
Hmm.
before the course starts,
Hmm.
and it's a way of getting more. You wouldn't be able to tell it by the way I'm talking about it right now, but it's a way of becoming more articulate about the intention.
Right.
That the course, so living a grateful life in a fucked up world, we're not going to attack gratitude directly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, John Stuart Mills said happiness can only be approached indirectly, something like that. I don't know exactly the quote, but um, and gratitude's like that. And I think the problem with, and this is all now conversations that I've had, I've been able to articulate since forcing myself to have the conversation over and over and over and over. Gratitude, the problem we have right now culturally with gratitude is that people want to start there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're going to do your gratitude journal, which means you're starting with gratitude.
Right.
Right. And
Hmm.
which is fine on one hand, right? I mean, I do gratitude meditations every morning,
Yeah.
right? And that's starting with gratitude. And we pick some low level, you know, not low level, some low shelf, easy to access
Mm-hmm.
piece that you're already grateful for.
Right. Yeah.
Right. That you can resonate on, that you can vibrate on, that you can bring that frequency in, that you can focus on, that you can then start your day with that level.
Right.
And there's a value in that. So I'm not saying gratitude that's way more valuable than gratitude journal in my experience. People can have whatever experience they've had, which is great. But my general experience of journaling and gratitude journaling in particular is at some point it's going to turn into a rote phenomenon where I'm just going to be listing things
Yeah.
without making the effort to be present to the experience of those
Right.
things.
Right.
And there'll be a list that I'm waiting to overtake me with gratitude, and that's not going to fucking happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Right.
At best, you're
Yeah.
putting icing on mud. And so, you know, the meditation at least is 10 minutes. And the first 5 minutes of the meditation is just settling into the body and becoming aware of your body.
Hmm.
And then the second 5 minutes is picking something you're grateful for. I mean, that's really the formula, is the second 5 minutes
Yeah.
is picking, and then resonating and vibrating with that thing.
Hmm.
And that sort of sets a baseline, but it doesn't give you any place to hold all the fucked up shit that you have in your life.
Hmm. Hmm.
All the frustrations, anger, upset, disappointment, grief
Hmm.
that you have in your life. Where does that go in your gratitude journal? How do you handle that in a way that would leave you in the presence of gratitude? And for that, this is an answer. This is the answer that I've come up with. This has worked for me. This is a useful framework in which you can learn how to develop the capacity. I had a breakthrough at the gym today. Okay. So it's our first recording of 2025. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. It is. Yeah. Yeah.
And I get to talk about I'm in CrossFit. This is fucking great.
Hey. The
Hey.
planets are aligned.
Oh my God.
Oh,
CrossFit. Hey.
serendipity.
Serendipity. Um, uh, he had a breakthrough in learning how to front squat, like how to hold the bar in a way that doesn't break my wrists. And
Uh-huh.
um, I've been at it for 5 years, and but it just clicked this morning. Something just clicked out of practicing it and playing with it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and there's that something got developed both it muscularly, like I'm stronger than I was, but also I have new neuronal pathways that allowed something to my body to move in a way that it wasn't allowed to move before, that it wasn't moving
Hmm.
before.
Hmm.
And these 9 weeks of mindfulness, really the first 7 weeks and into week 8, we don't even talk about gratitude till week 8, really.
Huh.
I was just looking at my
Yeah.
layout, right? So, um, because you're not ready for it. You can't handle the truth. It's not, we're not going there. So we're just going to develop the pathways, the neuronal pathways
Mm.
that you're going to grow your brain, which mindfulness is 100% reliable for growing your brain in a particular way, like
Mm.
running exercises your cardiovascular health, and
Yeah.
resistance training builds muscle. Mindfulness builds your prefrontal cortex and
Hmm.
thins your amygdala.
Yeah.
It just does. That's what you're doing. That's how it works. So by 8 weeks in, there's enough developed in your brain where some shit could happen to you. Grief, sorrow, anger, disappointment, something is going to happen to you, and you'll have enough resilience
Hmm.
and enough way of dealing with that you could then begin to look at that situation in a way that gratitude has the possibility of springing up.
Right.
And that's how you live a grateful life in a fucked up world. You just don't attack gratitude from the front. You go
Right.
about building the foundation in which it can arise. And
Hmm.
um
Hmm.
and that's but and that's fundamentally different in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. On one hand, it's just different than mindfulness for busy professionals. Um, how to have a powerful client meeting using mindfulness, right? All this
Right. Yeah.
good stuff and useful stuff. Um, and on the other hand, it's not really radically different at all, because you're building the same muscles. Now, whether or not you use those to develop deeper trust and more effective listening skills and better client relationships, or you deal with, and you'll build the resilience to deal with, the deal that falls apart, or the client that calls you back, or all the
Yeah.
shit that happens in business. Um, you're still executing and developing the same muscles. Um,
Hmm.
there's just a slightly different take on the outcome. One outcome is, I want you to have more business. The other outcome is, I'd like you to be more grateful with the business you
Hmm.
have. And
Hmm.
uh,
Right.
I still don't have that sorted out, which is better, or if I can weave those back together in another program. I don't have that sorted out. That's the stuff now, that the new stuff in the playground to play with,
Right. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
that's how that course is running. That's what that
Yeah.
is.
Love that. I really like, as you were sharing, I just could see the living a grateful life in a fucked up world is a front door, a first experience in the conversation. And for those who are on a business track, or those who are busy professionals that want the 90-page workbook, to, like there's a particular path for those people
Mhm.
as your containers expand. And then there's another track for retired people who want to, I mean,
Yeah.
living a grateful life in a fucked up world is a really great front door, really great
Yeah.
initial place to hang out in the conversation.
Yeah. Right. So, oh, good. So if you look at it from that way, then that's the front. That's for anybody.
Yeah.
And then there's, okay, here's specific things for busy professionals. Here's something specific for retirees, for
Parents.
new parents, right?
Yep. Right.
New set of different meditations, but all built on the foundation of,
Yeah. Yeah.
you have the access to living a grateful life. And then
Yeah.
once that's accessible, then all the other meditations and all the other trappings. That's a good way
Yeah.
to look at it. I like that.
I'd love to
Again,
see
that's what you get for,
throwing the ball around. Right. Yeah. No, that's right. Yeah. Throw the ball around. I'd love to see a path for high school kids, college kids, young adults, 20 somethings. I'd love to see, them in a space of living a grateful life in a fucked up world. with then a path for specific for them. Like that'd be really
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. Love
Yeah.
it,
Good.
man.
I like that.
That's it's I mean, to the point where we kind of started the conversation, I feel like this is the benefit of throwing the ball around is um it's hard to have these kinds of conversations by yourself because you only see what you see and like it's like throwing the ball to yourself. Throw it and then try to catch it. But like I don't know, there's just something that is easier, looser about throwing the ball around with other people. Um so
Well, you get to, you got to deal with their spin on the ball. You got to deal with how they throw it. It creates
yeah,
new, and it's, more impactful. And
yeah,
then if you're not executing on any of it, there's only so much difference that it's going to make. There's just
right.
not until you then take what you're hearing and apply it to something in the world,
Yeah.
you don't get to see how it holds up. You don't get to see the weaknesses in it. I don't get to see anything that a lot of what I shared about, I wouldn't get to see if there wasn't,
Yeah.
if it didn't,
Yeah.
I wasn't forced down the road of making a landing page.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I was getting to yesterday with like the I like throwing the ball around and I can't shake this feeling like there's something else we could do. Like, what do we want to build? What do we want to create? Because it's, and there's I think that's a constant tension in like being versus doing or, being present here versus like having a goal for the future. I mean, that's the mindful CEO part. It's the let's be here in this present moment and throw the ball, but also let's not forget about KPIs and what we want to produce. Let's measure stuff without making either of them wrong, without making like throwing the ball around is not wrong, but also wanting to create something is not wrong. But I think that's kind of, if I get back to my idol thing, it's in some ways we kind of do that. We go, oh well, this is the standard. This is we should be here for KPIs. Who gives a shit about gratitude? Let's just go hustle, or vice versa. I mean, it's like so easy to be binary about, well, this is the right way. No, this is the right way, and that to me is idol culture. Because you're putting something on someone or something on a pedestal. No, this is the right way. No, this is the right way. It's like, well, what's your way? What's your way? And
And
I
then,
like that we're both finding that for ourselves. I feel
yeah,
like we're both taking the purple crayon for a walk on that.
I think it's great. There's that place that you get to come to where you own the contribution that you're out to make,
Mm.
that you're speaking to, and that was
Yeah.
specifically in the idol um,
Yeah.
culture conversation, right? That you get to own because I deal with that again until I execute and get this, moving out. I'm like, well, what the fuck, I mean, I just got invited to Rewiring Your Brain Summit with Sharon Salzberg and Jack Kornfield and Fleet Mall and all these big names, right? There's always people bigger than you making the difference you want. None of us have, you know, a unique, never thought of before, this
Yeah.
is not like nothing else kind of,
Right.
certainly not out of the gate. You may develop something, but it's your voice, and your voice
Yeah.
is, in fact, as unique as it
Mm.
comes. And, we find a way, when this show exists to empower that voice and being expressed in very
Yeah.
many, right? All right, good. All right, let's put a pin in
Mm.
that.
Put a pin. Hey, if you guys want to learn more about, where can they go to learn more about your program and some of the stuff you're working on?
Uh, I'm trying to get the website the landing page to be set up on uh, uh, living-a-grateful-life.com. Right now it's not, but it will be.
Living dash a dash grateful
It
dash
was,
life dot
yeah,
com.
something. Yeah, I'll figure it out. Anyway, it'll be in the
All right.
show. Or just
Okay.
the
All right.
best way to get it is to message me on Facebook or on
All right.
YouTube, or
Okay.
go to the Mindful CEO podcast on YouTube, message me, whatever.
Okay. All right. All
I'm
right.
not
Good.
hard to find. Come get me.
Aaron Hendon. All right, good. If you guys want to learn more about Business Church, the website is up. I'm still tweaking some stuff, but if you go to businesschurch.co, that site is live. There are places you can click through to explore the different spaces we have for those interested. And then if you are, one of our tens of listeners and you want to leave us a review or share this podcast with
Yes.
somebody, share it because, like I think these are pretty unique conversations, Aaron. I mean, I'm not trying to stroke us or anything. I just think like in a world of hustle culture, these conversations are fewer. The kinds that we have here are fewer. And so encourage someone, find one of your episodes you love the conversations we've had and share it with someone that you care for.
Yeah, that would be great. We'd love, that would be the best way to contribute to us.
Yeah. All right, man. Thank you, Aaron. See y'all next time. Bye.